Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for another of our National Year of Reading webinars in partnership with Accessit as we celebrate and mark the National Year of Reading. This webinar is focusing on supporting readers with special educational needs through the school library and coincides with Learning Disability Week. So we're really excited to have an amazing programme of speakers this afternoon. Quite a lot to get through, and I hope that you are going to enjoy every moment of it. I will be your chair today. My name is Victoria Dilley. I'm Chief Executive of the School Library Association. And in my experience as a librarian for 10 years working in schools with children aged 3 to 18, the school library offers a really amazing safe space and opportunity to support those young people with special educational needs, and very often a place where they could come and speak with the school librarian and, you know, really kind of engage with reading in a way that maybe wouldn't otherwise happen if they didn't have access to a school library and indeed a school librarian to support them. So we're joined by a whole amazing array of speakers, and I'm going to swiftly move on to introducing our first speaker, who is Jessie Ricketts, Professor of Psychology at Royal Holloway University, and her research focuses on reading, language and literacy development in children and young people. I am sure many of you will be very familiar with her work, and I'm really pleased that she is joining us this afternoon and is our first speaker. So over to you, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you so much to SLA for inviting me to do this today. I'm particularly pleased because I spend a lot of time working with teachers, some time working with librarians, but not enough. In my view. So I'm just going to share my slides, and I'm really looking forward to today because we've got a really great lineup of people. So hopefully it's not very speedy, but hopefully these are coming up slowly. And that's the end, so I need to take you to the beginning. Okay, I can't at the moment see anybody, so perhaps Anna or Victoria, if you could just let me know that everyone can see my slides.
We can see your slides coming through.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the research I've done, but thinking about it through the lens of reading, but also through the lens of SEND. So the way that I always like to start my presentations about reading is by thinking about how we define reading. And that's because, of course, we can take a very broad definition of reading, and I do. I am a reader. I love reading. I read every day. I've always been an avid reader, except maybe a little bit less so as a teenager. And I'm going to come on to teenagers in a moment. But I think it's really useful, and particularly in the research I do, to be very clear about how I'm defining reading for this particular piece of work. And it's useful for us to think about how we're defining reading within my presentation for today. Now, what I tend to focus on in my research is thinking about knowledge and skills, and what are the knowledge and skills that young people absolutely need to be successful readers. I've also done quite a lot of work on engagement as well, so choosing to read and what young people are reading too. And the starting point is the simple view of reading, which really just says that for successful reading, we need two things. We need to be able to read words, and we need to be able to understand language and the messages conveyed by text. Now, this is another way of seeing the simple view of reading. So you can see the roof that is reading for meaning, reading successfully for comprehension, that's held up by word reading and language comprehension. And whilst this depiction of the simple view of reading reminds us that we need to think about reading on at least two dimensions, so not just, you know, thinking about readers and pupils with or without SEND in relation to their reading on one dimension, but at least two dimensions, that is word reading and language comprehension. And this way of thinking about the simple view of reading reminds us that reading is an incredibly complex skill or set of skills, really, and that this roof of success is held up by so many things coming together in synchrony to allow young people to build a mental model of the text that they're reading. And what that also means is that there are a number of reasons why reading may not be successful, and I think that's really important to note as well, especially when we think about reading needs and we start thinking about SEND. So this is just a very quick snapshot of the research that I've been doing recently. So the approach I take is to combine longitudinal research, where we follow young people up over time, with experimental research, where we look at the interplay between reading and maybe other things like vocabulary, in my case. And just a couple of key findings that I think are particularly relevant for anyone who's working with young people and around education is that what we see as pupils move through upper primary and through secondary school is huge variation in terms of their knowledge and skills. So that is that the kind of knowledge and skills that young people in our classrooms are bringing, or in our libraries are bringing to the task of reading, is hugely variable, more variable than I would have anticipated when I embarked on doing this work about 12 years ago. We also do see high levels of need, and that's something that we do need to think about, and particularly for those from a more disadvantaged background. So that's something we need to be alert to. And what I think it means for all of us is that reading is absolutely not just a primary school issue. In case you need to be persuaded, I suspect you don't. That professional development for everybody who's working around reading is really important, and it's important that we share all of our best practice and all of our diverse knowledge about reading and what makes it work and what makes it young people engage with it. And that we need to make sure we know who in school has challenges around reading. So we need effective approaches for identifying and supporting reading needs, and also making sure that we check that what we're doing is working, that it's having impact. So what I've been doing around this research is trying to come up with some solutions, really. And in thinking about reading not just being a primary school issue, I've put together a teenage reading network. So if you're interested in that, there's more information here. I'm sure these slides can be shared afterwards, so don't worry now. And that's just bringing together lots of people from different backgrounds who are interested in teenage reading so that we can mobilize together to make a difference in this space. I've also been working with the Department for Education and other colleagues to develop 2 programs of CPD for teachers. And the idea there is to kind of upskill the whole teaching profession so that we can best support our young people. And I also have been doing some work thinking about how we can identify reading needs in secondary schools with the information that secondary schools already have about reading, and sometimes adding some really important information to make sure that those decisions about who has reading needs, what kind of reading needs they have, and how to support them are really, really robust. And that's really important, that decision-making process, because of course resources are thin. You know, none of us have as much resources as we would like to do all of this important work around reading knowledge and skills, but also of course reading engagement. And so we need to make very careful decisions about where we put those scarce resources. Now, what secondary schools do have, and primary schools too, is lots of indicators of risk in relation to reading needs. So, you know, we might know about SEND, that's what we're talking about today. We might know about English as an additional language. We might know about pupil premium or free school meal status. We might have some national assessment data, so that might be from the phonics screening check or the Key Stage 2 assessments. But my argument really is that we need to complement that with data that's going to tell us with reliability whether the needs that those pupils are or are not encountering are to do with reading. And it's important to note that categories like SEND and EAL and pupil premium are not at all deterministic. I'm sure we're all on the same page here about reading needs. We have some young people with SEND or with EAL or with pupil premium who do have reading needs, but equally there are young people in those groups that don't. So we need to take a needs-based approach to thinking about whether young people need support. And for that, we need to have precise, robust data. And so that we can then do all of the wonderful things that we want to do. So I have worked on an approach to thinking about this, which combines kind of screening so that young people don't fall through the net with careful diagnostics. I can talk about this more at the end if people are interested. But finally, we've been really motivated to make sure that we're not just looking at proficiency, but that we are also looking at engagement. How much young people are reading? What are they choosing to read? Why, if they're not choosing to read, are they not? You know, we've done a lot of work drawing on student voice and pupil voice to try and really understand from teenagers' perspectives what they think about reading and why they do read or why they don't read and what would encourage them to read more. But one of the key findings from this research is that there is a kind of virtuous circle between how successful you are in your reading and how engaged you are with reading. But the proficiency does need to come first. If we're talking about independent reading, so young people choosing to read independently, they do need to have that knowledge and skills at the beginning, and then they can enter into this wonderful kind of symbiotic relationship between being able to read and then reading and so on and so forth. So integrating in schools what we're doing to support knowledge and skills and what we're doing to support engagement is really important. And that is where librarians and libraries are so important, because when we speak to young people, when we speak to teachers about supporting reading, often what we hear is that young people or teachers or even parents like myself, they don't have the knowledge about books and about reading in order to support their young people in the way that they would like to. And that's why librarians are so important. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from the other speakers today, and hopefully more from you guys in the audience about your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessie. Literally amazing insight there. I really appreciate you flagging the importance of professional development as well, because that's something that can be challenging to access when you are a school librarian. But also, I think there's something around working with your colleagues in school and thinking about, you know, what are the learning, what the learning team, the Senko team's doing, and how you can get involved with that. And also not making assumptions. As a mother of a son who has dyslexia and had struggles with certain aspects of the curriculum and reading, but not all of them, how can we be making sure that we are as inclusive as possible? So thank you so much, Jessie.
And if any of the audience or indeed yourselves have any ideas about where there might be professional development needs within your community, I'd be really keen to hear about that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. So somebody who knows an awful lot about building inclusive reading communities is our next speaker, who is author Eve Ainsworth, who I am pleased to say I have worked with previously. And she's written some incredible books that have inspired young readers, I'm sure. And she's an experienced speaker and workshop leader working with schools and libraries across the UK and internationally, and really passionate about supporting young people, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I'm really pleased to welcome Eve, our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for that lovely welcome. And yes, I'm so happy to be with you all today. Some of you I may have met, and many of you will know that I have worked in education for over 10 years now. So alongside being an author, I work within schools, unfortunately full-time now, so that I'm not as able to get round to school libraries as much as I used to. So I do miss my visits and my school talks, but hopefully one day that will change soon. So I'm here mainly to talk about my latest book, Jelly Bean, which came out recently, and to talk a little bit about school avoidance, which is something I'm quite passionate about. It's something that I've worked directly with young people and supported with, and I still think there's a little bit of I would say ignorance actually, and misunderstanding about young people that are experiencing this. When I first started working in schools, it was about 11 years ago now, I actually supported a young girl who kind of inspired Jelly Bean. So the story of Jelly Bean kind of sits with this young girl that I supported. So Ellie in Jelly Bean reminds me of this young girl that I worked with, and she was a wonderful girl. She was so clever. She had so much potential, but she had extreme issues at home, lots and lots of problems at home that were really just sitting on top of her, really, and she didn't know how to deal with them. She didn't know how to speak about what was going on. She very often internalized her problems and almost become quite mute. She was later diagnosed with autism, but wasn't at the time that she was in secondary school, as with many girls that are later diagnosed and not picked up at school age. And her way of dealing with things really was it would all come down quite heavy on her, and she would just not be able to cope with things. So she stopped coming to school. She just couldn't come to school. She would literally open the door. She'd get ready She put her school uniform on, she'd have her breakfast, she would be all prepared to come in because she was academic. She wanted to do well, and she actually had lots of friends and she loved being in the school environment. But she really, there was something stopping her, and she would open that front door, she would take those few steps down the front path, and then this block would happen and she would not be able to move any further, and she could not get into school. And you know, the years ago that I was working with this, very much the title given was school refuser. This was somebody who was a school refuser. They would not come into school, and there was lots of misinformation given about it. I'm glad to say now that we have a lot more understanding about young people that are struggling with coming to school, and we now understand it's more emotional based school avoidance, and that's the title that we use. Although unfortunately I still hear people say school refusing or school refuser, which is a term that we really need to move away from, because it is emotionally based. It is something that very often the young people just cannot explain or cannot tell us why they are unable to come into school. And I've worked with several young people in this kind of environment. I've worked with a young girl who unfortunately was a victim of grooming and was involved in all sorts of horrible things, exploitation outside of school. And even though school was her safe place and it was a place that she wanted to come to, again, the overwhelm that was hitting her meant that she would very often not even be able to leave her home. I now work in a SEND school, which faces its own challenges and difficulties if any of you are in a SEND school environment. And I have one young boy who is non-verbal, so he's unable to articulate his feelings and thoughts. And he was attending school absolutely fine, and then one day he just couldn't do it. He just could not leave the house, and literally would shut himself in the car crying, not able to come into the building, even though school for so long had been a really lovely place for him to come and there'd been no issues and he really enjoyed it and had lots of friends. For him, just suddenly there was this shutdown in his mind that he could no longer attend school. So we have to work really carefully with these young people and really understand what some of the challenges are, and break down some of those barriers. And it can take an awful long time. The young child that I'm working with now, he's still not attending school, and we're having to do a lot of homeschool. We're having to do a lot of work with mum and dad, just to keep those channels of communication open, and just really drip feeding the idea of coming back into school again. So whether it be gentle reintroductions, you know, gentle meetings with the teachers again, little things that we can just do just to help. And really, this is what Jelly Bean's about. It's not a fix-it-all book, and I didn't want it to be either. It's a story about a young girl who literally is like my first girl that I spoke about, who leaves the house one day and she cannot face going to school. She does her walk in and she realizes she cannot go any further. And she ends up at home. She cannot tell, she cannot articulate what's going on. It's not that she's being bullied. There's not a specific reason why she can't go into school. But she has this overwhelming anxiety and pressure that she cannot really articulate why she's unable to be there. And throughout the book, it's just those little build-ups of appointments and CAMS referrals and little things that might happen for a young person when they're experiencing this. And the ending is very up in the air. You know, does she go back, does she not? Because I didn't want there to be this happy ever after, because unfortunately for a lot of our young people, it isn't a fix it all, this is what's going to fix the problem. It does take time. Sometimes our young people will come back into school for a few days and then they'll be back home again, and it'll be a period of being at home. It's very often a back and forth approach that's taken. So I wanted that book to kind of represent that. And so far, I've had some really, really good feedback as well. So that's been an amazing thing to be able to see. So if any of you read Jelly Bean, want to feedback on me, I'd love to hear that. But this has been a very personal book, and I'm really, really proud that we have it out there and that we can talk about emotional-based school avoidance in a more positive and a more realistic way.
Amazing, Eve. Thank you so much. It's so important to to understand such a massive array of diverse needs and perspectives in every young person, and actually really important for other children to be able to read about it so they can understand maybe why their peers are kind of making choices and behaving in a particular way. But thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And just a reminder, everyone, please do use the Q&A stream if you have any questions, and we will hope to come to those at the end. Our next speaker knows a huge amount about creating wonderful books that are inclusive and accessible. Joining us is Emma Steele. She's head of the imprint at Every Cherry Publishing and draws on her background in special educational needs education to create inclusive books that empower all readers. So Emma, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here and lovely to meet you all online. I'm just going to share my presentation now for you all. Here we are. Okay. I just wanted to, before we start, the book Jelly Bean actually came up in our office yesterday or the day before, because we were looking at inspirational covers and we used the Jelly Bean cover as inspiration for one of our titles that I'll discuss later. So it was nice to hear all about the book. So welcome to Every Cherry Publishing. So just a little bit about me. I used to be a special educational needs and disabilities teacher. So I worked with many different age groups for quite a long career of about 17 years. And although that doesn't make me an expert in SEND at all, it does mean that I have had a lot of experience with teaching English to people with varying disabilities. Which is why I was very, very passionate about trying to make reading as accessible as possible, because as a teacher I found that quite a challenge, and I think that might be the case across the UK, in that often teachers will perhaps adapt titles for classroom teaching, and perhaps libraries may need to do accessible workshops for certain titles, and I wanted to change that to make sure that reading was accessible for as many people as possible, because actually loads of my students wanted to read, they just, the books weren't in a format that best suited them. So before I start, one of the things that I like to start with is to just think about what SEND actually means. So when I refer to SEND, I mean special educational needs and disabilities. And one of the ways that I do that is by asking people to look at this image and tell me what they see. Now, usually when I ask this, many people will say they see a young woman, and other people will say they see an old lady, and they are both right. So this picture is called My Wife and Mother-in-Law, and there are two women in this image. And the reason I show this is because people with disabilities and all of us see the world in different ways, and we're not wrong. We may see two people in this picture, we may see one. It doesn't mean that any of us are wrong, it just means that we see the world in different ways, and that is the way that I like to think about how we can cater for the SEND community and try and make sure that reading is accessible and inclusive as possible so that everybody can enjoy the magic of reading. Now, I'm just going to run through a few statistics, but I won't spend too much time doing this. Now, I know that this has literally been updated about 2 days ago. So now the statistic is that over 1.8 million people have been diagnosed with a special educational need or disability in the UK. So it is rising, and I think that's potentially rising because we are better at diagnosing it and recognising it. However, it's something that we need to think about when we think about reading, because there are so many people out there that really could do with titles that can make reading more accessible. And looking at these statistics, we can see why that might be. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these statistics, but I will keep them here. And as we know, everything changes in this country depending on the government and the focus on SEND. And at the moment, SEND is quite prominent in the media, especially with the new education white paper coming out. So please do look into how the government is shaping SEND reform and what we can expect in the future. But I'm going to move on from this because I want to make sure that I can cover everything. So when I moved from teaching into publishing, I spent a year doing a lot of research into what accessible reading means. And I knew that no one book and no one format can reach every single person. So there are lots and lots of different things that publishers do to try and make reading accessible, such as using dyslexia-friendly font, Braille, audiobooks, pastel paper, bigger fonts, and many other things too. These are all absolutely brilliant to help people to access reading, and they're all great accessibility reading tools. What we've tried to do at Every Cherry is to think about the cognition and comprehension for young people as they are reading. So what we've done is we've tried to create what we've called a total reading experience. So we've incorporated accessible reading tools with accessible reading approaches, and I will delve into this a little bit more as I go through. So firstly, if we strip it right back, this is what I did as part of my research when I was first starting in publishing. And one of the things that I found really useful is to think about how humanity told stories. So when we look way back when, the first mark makings of stories or evidence of stories began on cave walls back in the Stone Age with images of beliefs, culture, all drawn on walls. And that is the first form of storytelling that we know of at the moment. Now, as we go through history, people have told stories in different ways. So, for example, the ancient Greeks told stories through artwork on pottery. We had the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, which used images to tell and hieroglyphics to create a language vocabulary format, which again communicated meaning. We also had stained glass windows. These were a really popular way to tell stories of the Bible because not everybody could read in Latin. So these images and windows helped people to see what Bible stories were trying to convey. Also, then we go to the ideographic and mnemonic symbols from the Bronze Age as well. So over history and over time, we have used images and pictures to tell stories and support the spoken word or written word. And we still use symbols and images today. So I'm sure if you were to all look at these images here, we would all know what they meant. They have no words attached to them at all, but we can see what they mean. If I was to show you this image, I wonder whether any of you know what these words mean. They are written in Arabic. I can't read Arabic. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience can, but if we were to then, so for anyone that doesn't understand what this means, if we were to add this image to it, we can see that I can see that it means fire exit because this is a universal image. So this is a really good way to think about how we can make reading more accessible, even for ourselves if we were to travel, but also for people who find reading a struggle. Now, I know that we've covered what reading is, and I know that the speaker before me has covered this in much more depth, but what I did was I stripped it right back to a simple dictionary definition, and I know there's a lot more to it than this, but what I found quite interesting in this definition was to look at and understand the meaning of words or symbols. And that's what we've done here. So that's what we have here. Sorry, I realise that I'm going to go over time slightly. Now, just to give you a little bit of insight into Every Cherry. So accessibility is growing. So there are lots and lots of brands, lots and lots of publishing houses that are starting to try and make items, books accessible as possible. And here we have different accessible formats. Now, just to quickly talk you through what Every Cherry does. So we have 3 different types of ranges. We have an easier range, which uses dyslexia-friendly font and many other accessible features, such as a glossary, an audio glossary, page numbers on every page, and many more. Our most popular range is our symbolized range. So symbols are images that sit above keywords, and they give readers a visual clue as to what they are reading. Symbols are used a lot in the SEND world for communication devices and many other reasons, but from my knowledge, there aren't many publishers that publish in symbols. In fact, I don't know of any others in the UK. The key thing to see about these is that the page numbers match. So if you were to say in your library or in a school, everyone turn to page 10, the content's the same, but the symbols, but the format is different. The final range that I just wanted to talk through is our Stories for Your Senses range. Now this range is a storytelling adventure where the reader, carer, parent collects everything that they need to tell the story. So you collect the tangible real life items, and then as you read through the story, you can use those items to explore through a sensory approach. So it's very, very inclusive and great for preschoolers as well as people with disabilities. Now, before I move on, I just wanted to say, because I know that I'm stuck for time, but you can have a look at this presentation in more detail if you wanted to. We have many accessible features, but some of those include a free audiobook for every single book that we publish. We also have free signed videos. So we use signed videos that support the symbolized books. So what we try to do is provide a safety net for our readers. So if they are struggling to continue to read but are really engaged in the story, they can use these accessible features to continue their journey through the story, but in a more accessible way. Now the final one, have I got time to just talk about the final few books that are coming out? Thank you. So this is something that we're really, really excited about. And this is called our Every Cherry Originals. So these are, we're calling them SEND YA, so young adult literature. They have lots and lots of accessibility features, some that I've spoken about before, but they were actually inspired by focus groups from the disability community, and they spoke about their teenage years, how they found being a teenager, and then we have set books in an SEND school. They cover representation, and they also cover the experiences that young people will have as growing up as a teenager with a disability. Then once we'd got our briefs, we then sourced neurodivergent authors to write the books, and then throughout the whole process they've been part of the approvals process, reading the titles and making sure everything is as they want it to be. So we're really excited for these to come out. These are a sneak peek, but these are not final covers, but I did want to talk to you about these because we feel like this is a really great way to make accessible literature and include the SEND community in that journey. I think I'll stop there because otherwise I'll go over too much. But thank you for listening. And if you do need, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I'm more than willing to share these slides should you want them.
Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was really amazing. I'm sorry that we had to cut you a little bit short, but what incredible work you're doing. And I love that the story is at the heart of it. So, you know, whatever form it needs to be in, so that it's truly inclusive. It's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I also love the fact that you've got that teen experience at the heart of your new titles coming out. Right, so now we are going to move on to our next speaker. Thank you again, Emma. And this is someone who has lived experience of ADHD, and you may be familiar with him. He is Sam Thompson. He's a television presenter, radio host, podcaster, and author. And through his book, You, Me and ADHD, he shares his personal experiences of ADHD and champions greater understanding of neurodiversity. And he met earlier this week with our school library lead, Hannah Clover, who interviewed him for this event today. So we are now going to share a recording of that interview.
Lovely to be here with you. So you were diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Looking back, is there anything that you wish the adults around you understood when you were at school?
For me, it would have been not for lack of trying. And when I say that, I mean, like, I actually wanted to do really well academically at school. I wasn't like trying to be cool, or I wasn't trying to be disruptive or anything like that. Like, I genuinely would like go up to my teachers and be like, is there anything I can do to be better? Because I'm pretty not great, and you're telling me I'm not great, and like that makes me sad. I don't really know what to do about it. And it was I've told this story a few times before, but I just remember being doing my homework, or trying to do my homework, trying to revise, and just the words not going into my head, and I was focusing on what my mind was saying. So, like, for example, let's say I'd read a biology book or whatever, and it'd be like, oh God, I don't know any biology to make an example out of, but I'd be reading something and I'd be going, and then this, and I'd be like, oh my God, all I'm thinking about is the words that are in my head, and I'm not even thinking about what's on the page, and nothing's going in. I just cried into my textbook, and I was like, this is so annoying, because like the teacher's gonna give me a detention again, say that I'm lazy, and just can't concentrate, and I actually am sitting here trying. So in a very long-winded answer, it's like, I actually really am trying, and I want you to acknowledge that. And I wish we could have like formulated a different way of working.
There's got to be appreciation for the effort, even if the outcome isn't like the same for every child, right?
Well, to be honest with you, Hannah, I would have loved that appreciation, and then like, how do we deal with that? Like, how do we learn, and like what's the best way to do that? And you know, I mean, this is miles down the line, because back when I was at school, ADHD still wasn't really a thing. It was like you're either you're just a bad kid, or you're dyslexic was something that people knew about. So it would have been great to sort of have, like, you know, if you need to take a minute, or if you need a fidget toy, if you need like a verbal way of learning, for me would have been brilliant. Just a conversation about something like that, and an acknowledgement would have been really pretty spot on.
No, that's fantastic, and it's all really valuable stuff for our sort of members to hear about and apply to what they do in their schools. And similarly on that, a lot of young people with SEND needs often feel like they're being told they're doing the wrong thing, and your book talks about how ADHD can be a superpower. So are there strengths that you think it's given you along the way, even though that learning experience was challenging?
Yeah, for sure. The superpower element is really important to me. It's actually also a slight cause for controversy in the neurodiverse world, because I understand as well as anyone like how tough ADHD can be. It can be incredibly hard, especially if you don't find the thing that you love the most. Like, and that's very hard to do. Like, most of us in this world aren't fortunate enough to be able to find the thing they love and then turn that into a job, or turn that into something that they can actually sort of like excel in. It's a privilege to be able to find that, but I really want, especially kids, Hannah, I want kids to feel like there is a path to greatness with this, you know, and you're going to get told a lot as a kid that there's bad things with ADHD, and it can be debilitating, all these things, and that might be true. And it is true a lot of the time, but I want to tell kids that actually, if you do really try and figure out what it is that you adore, and you hyper focus on that, then it can be a superpower. You can be super with this, and you can be proud of what you have. And like most CEOs in the world have ADHD and or autism, by the way. Yeah, there's a percentage. I think it's like higher. I'm gonna get like, I don't know the full thing. I'm almost certain though, when we did this documentary a couple of years ago, it was higher than 60%.
Yeah.
So like it's a huge amount of people who are amazing at running businesses and creative and entrepreneurs are neurodiverse. And I think that is such an amazing stat. I want people to know that there is something really powerful about what they have, and I get called a lot by mums and with their kids, and I'll be walking down the street or something, they'll be like, oh, like, can my kids speak to you? They feel like they've just had diagnosis of ADHD and they feel less than, and it breaks my heart, because I'm like, you're not less than, you're more than. You're more than. Don't get me wrong, it's really hard in places, but like, you're more than. You should be proud of who you are, and if this book can help even the slightest in a child or a parent, by the way, or a teacher, understanding what is going on in that kid's mind, and then trying to sort of be with that person, and then try and grow them as fits their needs, I think they'll become a superhero.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about not compromising what they've already got for the sake of like that they can have it and it excels them. Brilliant. So yeah, and a lot of schools are trying to create those inclusive environments and that environment for children to thrive, you know, across all their different needs. When you were in school, what made you feel understood and supported?
Tough, because I never really did.
Then flip it. What made you feel misunderstood that was potentially you'd like to see there now?
Oh, I mean, for me, it would just be, like I said earlier, the teacher understanding. I think no one understood what ADHD really was when I was at school, unless you were like bouncing off the walls. There's obviously a spectrum. It's like, unless you were so far that way, it just got completely under the radar, and you were just a naughty kid. It was the worst, because if you were that person who was very, very like clearly on that end of the spectrum, you would get given the grace of that. But you know, if you weren't, you just got left behind. It was incredibly tough. So there were many times. I had one teacher who just put an arm around me, who I really loved, and he would literally just be like, "Mate, you've got this. You're doing really well." And he would come over. I think he knew I needed extra help, and so he would always give me the extra time, and always. I don't know if this is the same. I can only speak from a personal point of view, but being there for a kid and making them feel like a champion and championing that child, I think is one of the bravest, not bravest, that's the wrong word, one of the best things that a teacher can do. And that's just my opinion, but I think if you can champion a child and make them feel super, then I think you are doing the best job ever. Because like, I remember when I had like very few, there were like 2 teachers who put an arm around me, and I felt like I would run through walls for them. I would run through walls, and I would just try so hard, and then they would see me trying so hard and be like, do you know what, let's change. Like, a few of my teachers actually did change the way that I would learn, and they were just brilliant. I'll never forget them, and they're very few and far between when I was at school. But putting an arm around a kid and you know, just being like, hey man, I've got you, like, you're gonna be brilliant at this, I just think is so important, and it made such a difference to me.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's fantastic, because that's something that anyone in a school environment working with, you know, that's people facing, has the opportunity to do.
Do you know what is interesting, Hannah, as well, is that, like, obviously I understand that you're like, some of these teachers in classes of like 30 kids, and so it's like, you know, it's very hard to find that kid in 30 who needs an arm around. There might be 10 who need an arm around. Honestly, they all need an arm around in some capacity. So as a teacher, like, I imagine it must be incredibly hard to sort of like try and divide your time, your focus around who needs more help, and like just one teacher is tough. Like, I almost wonder whether you need more than one teacher in a class. I think
Yeah.
that'd be really, really cool. You know, one teacher at the front, one teacher who's actually amongst the kids,
Yeah.
who's just paying them their full attention. I think it'd be really, really cool. I mean, how that would work, I don't know, and I'm sure there'd be
No.
plenty of people telling me why that
Yeah.
wouldn't work. But yeah,
Yeah.
for me, that is so important,
Yeah.
just championing a kid. And I know how hard that must be when you're in a class full of so many kids.
Absolutely, but it is the thing of the size. I remember in primary school, I wouldn't always finish all my work and I get kept behind at break, but I really enjoyed it because you got to just ask all the questions in a smaller group and you got to have a laugh, and it actually made learning so much
But you
easier.
also felt like you got to know the teacher a bit more.
Yes,
Which
they were
I know
personal.
sounds silly, but like it's like, you know, they're kind of like your second parent in a way once you're with them enough, you know. And I was lucky enough to have some amazing teachers. I'm lucky enough to have some others, but yeah, it's I always just thought that when I looked up to them and I had an arm around the shoulder and I felt like I could do anything, it just made the world of difference to me.
Yeah, no, and librarians have that ability within schools because they're not strictly teaching, they're not trying to get the same out of their kids, and many of our members will have experiences of seeing that different side to a pupil outside of lesson time, outside of when they're stressed, and getting to sort of work with them in that way. So for children who may be struggling, maybe they don't have a diagnosis yet, but they're feeling like there's something that's not clicking with them, is there any advice that you'd give them or something you'd want them to know?
I would say it's tough because, you know, I wouldn't even speak to the child. I'll speak to the parent.
Okay, yeah.
I'd say to the kid, and this is it's so much harder to put this into practice when you're of that age. And if I am speaking to a child now, I say this in the book, and I'm telling you now, communication is it being verbal with how you feel is so important. You know, it can start with a trickle and end in a flow. You know, you literally go, I feel a certain way to your parent. And I have ADHD and I'm autistic as well. So like, you know, my kid says that to me, I'm already like dialed in. But and I understand it's not like that for everyone. But if you just say the smallest thing to your parent, who might turn around and go, do you know what? They might be neurodiverse in some sort of way. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go speak to their teacher. Okay, you go and speak to their teacher. The teacher turns around and goes, do you know what? I was thinking there was something. I thought that he or she was just a little bit disruptive, but actually, now it's all kind of making sense. Do you know what? Actually, can you tell me a little bit more? Like, they're like, at home. Okay, cool. And actually, you saying that one thing as a child, as a kid to your parent or your teacher, it can go either way, can start a flood of positivity and positive change. And you know, also, by the way, when I did a documentary about ADHD, we boy kids are very much more seen than girls who have ADHD. And I would implore teachers and adults to look at the girds intently, and because there's no shortage of neurodiverse young girls either. And so it's I would implore them to look at young girls as well.
No, fantastic. No, and then so we're going to talk about the book a bit now. So what made you decide to write You, Me, ADHD for children rather than adults?
Do you know what? It's funny because that's a great way of wording that quote. I've obviously been asked that question a few times, but not like that. That's a lovely question. I didn't want to write a book for a while, and the neurodiverse space is a scary space to jump into two-footed. It's a very, as it should be, sensitive topic for a lot of people, and I don't want to get anything wrong. I don't want to rub people up the wrong way. I'm not coming into this being like I know everything about ADHD. It's not my personality. It's just who I am. And I didn't want to do it for ages. And then I had a conversation with my parents about what I was like at school, just around the dinner table. And I just thought to myself, you know what? School would have been so much easier if I'd known I had ADHD. And then if I'd known I had ADHD, it would have been so much easier to spoken to some other kid or someone else who had ADHD who could understand what I was going through. And I was like, I wonder what my schooling, because I was terrible at school because I was told I was terrible and I just failed a lot. And I was like, how different would it have been? And I remember just sitting there being like, you know what? I should do this. And the reason I should do this is not for anything other than younger Sam. Because there might be a young Sam there, a young me, who is sitting there going, I don't know what's up here, but I need to feel like I belong, and I need to try and understand my head and my brain a little bit more, not from a scientific point of view, from a personal point of view, and like what's helped that person and what can I maybe incorporate into my everyday routine that isn't too complex. And so the answer to your question is probably for little Sam. And that's kind of why I did it. And then my parents, because I wish it was a book my parents would have read.
No, and I think there's a lot of that as well, because it has, like you say, the understanding has grown a lot, so much that there's lots of people I think who reflect on, you know, maybe they have diagnoses now they didn't when they were younger, how, especially with education, how that changes things. So if a child reads your book and a year later they can only remember one thing from it, what's their main one thing you'd like them to keep in their heads and hold on to from your book?
I would say I've got two. One is the most important thing, I think, is communication. I know we've just spoken about that, but I really do believe, I've spoken to so many teachers and they just want to help, and they, like, so many teachers have come up to me and been like, if I know I can do something about it, you know, I can change the way that they learn, I can tailor certain things specifically for them. If they want a bit of time outside the classroom, not in a negative way, in a positive way, and they need to take a minute because they're overstimulated, or they need to sit in a different chair, or they need a fidget toy whilst they're sitting at the desk, I will do those things for them. That is, I know it sounds basic, that's such a positive change. It would have been for me as a kid to have that realization, and then to have my parents, an honest conversation with my parents about how I was feeling. And I know it sounds so silly because it's just like, oh, everyone's talks about, like, you know, talk to somebody. But with ADHD, in my personal opinion and my history, it would have just helped me so much. So I would say, if you can, just talk to somebody about how you're feeling and where you're at. And then my second thing, probably a little bit more emotionally, would be proud of who you are. You have no reason to not be. You have every single tool in that bank to succeed, and not just succeed, to overachieve. Know that you are worth everything, and having ADHD is, you know, something that is unique to you, and you are unique in the most brilliant possible way. And I want you to be proud of who you are, and I'm proud of who I am, finally. And I just, that's sort of the second thing I would say is please be proud of who you are, and don't feel ashamed, because you can achieve magnificent things with what you have.
No, it's so important. It's a message we'd like to give to all children as well, but especially to sort of give them like an empowering narrative that relates to their identity. And your book combines your own experiences with like quite practical advice as well. So was there anything that you sort of learned whilst writing it that surprised you? Like the thing about CEOs, you know, 60% of the CEOs, was there anything else as well?
For me, it's the small things. I was very lucky enough, and I haven't been, I confess I haven't been in a while actually, to a neurodiverse specific therapist, and I learn a lot from her. And for me, it's the little tools that you don't necessarily think will do. So I've got something that will do too much. I have a clock that I turn, and it's just a little red clock. It doesn't do anything different. It's just got a little red thing to it. I turn it, and it's every 5 minutes it turns red, and I sit down with my little mini things that I need to do, and that little 5-minute clock has saved me hours of procrastination. I have a cheat sheet of things that I write down and things I need to do. I've got I've got probably about 50 fidget toys in my left-hand drawer right now. I'm fiddling with the wand right now.
I've got a slinky.
I love a slinky. The small things, Hannah, I think for me actually make a huge difference. You know, obviously the medication can be life-changing and can save lives. I found for me it's the little things that one bunched together and you have enough of really help. And I didn't, I think, realize that until I was writing all of the things down, and I was like, oh god, actually there's so many things that I do, the little things that have really helped me.
No, that's fantastic, and it's great because then people can take that, can't they? And that's that's something that's really easy to tell a child about, or just to suggest that can work. Okay, well, it's the last question. We've kind of spoken about it because you spoke about writing your book for your younger self. So if you want to give yourself one bit of advice, go back in time about ADHD, what would your advice be? It might be communication, because we have said that a lot, but
it would be empathy. It would be I was so hard on myself. My parents were hard on me. My teachers were hard on me. Look at those. It would be look at those report cards that you get at the end of every term, and look at those cards and understand that they don't understand you. And you can be incredibly proud of where you will end up and what you will put your mind to. And you know, it's there are people out there who really want to help you, and the world isn't full of people who tell you that you're wrong and you're bad, and you need to find them, and they will find you. And so that's what I would say to myself.
That's fantastic. Place to end the interview. And thank you very much for your time and all your advice. I'm sure there's going to be lots of librarians sort of looking to get the book, and they will probably have children that they'd like to recommend it to as well.
Hannah, that's incredibly kind. And by the way, just FYI, all your questions are absolutely marvellous. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
No worries. No, that's great. Right, I will stop the recording.
Well, that was amazing insight, lived experience, incredible tips there, hopefully things that you can take away and think about with the children that you work with. But I'm aware we are running over time. Rest assured we're recording, so if you have to drop off the call, you will be able to catch up afterwards. But somebody who knows all about supporting young people, just like Sam, is our next speaker, April Ingram, who is library assistant from the Scottish Highlands, and she's passionate about helping children with SEND engage with reading, and is going to share some examples of creating inclusive collections, but also how you can use the library to support young people with special needs. So thank you so much for joining us, April. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So I am just going to share my slides with you. Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. My name is April and I'm the library assistant at Culloden Academy in the Scottish Highlands. I know from the SLN forum that we all work in very different schools up and down the country. So for a little context, I'll give you a quick introduction to the school where I work. Okay. So as you can see from the map, we're pretty far up in the north of Scotland, although you can still drive for a further couple of hours before you hit John O'Groats. There are 4 secondary schools in Inverness itself of varying sizes, and Culloden Academy is essentially the fifth school on the outskirts of the city. So we're quite a large school with over 1,100 pupils. The school is run by Highland Council. We don't have any fee-paying schools in Highland region, and the school provides the funding for the library. So all school librarians in Highland are library assistants and work for the Arts and Culture wing of Highland Council, High Life Highland. The school librarian is no longer a professional post up here. So our line managers are network librarians who have overall responsibility for school and public libraries. Okay, so let's move on to supporting kids who struggle with reading in schools. So when I was studying for my MSc LIS back in around 2007, I didn't really think much about barriers to reading at that time, and on my course they weren't really discussed in much depth, or at least I don't remember much discussion. When I started working in a school, as I was dealing with teenagers, I was very conscious of not embarrassing them. And for the first couple of years that I was in post, no information was shared with me about who had an additional support need. So helping kids choose a book that was right for them could be quite difficult. I tended to focus, like many of us do, on something that they would be interested in. So asking them about hobbies and interests, films or TV programs that they might like, although many of them tell me they don't watch TV, they only watch TikTok. And so often I never really felt like I was matching the right book up with the right struggling reader. So after a couple of years working in school and after learning more about additional support needs and particularly dyslexia, I felt that I'd try out a new way of helping pupils choose a book, especially those that I would see week after week, wandering the shelves, pulling out book spines, but not actually engaging with the books. And these were often kids that told me that they find reading boring. So the question that I started to ask them was, do you find reading boring, or do you find it tricky, or is it a bit of both? Many kids have find reading boring because they find it tricky. When it comes to inclusive and accessible collections, I've spoken with lots of my colleagues in school and public libraries, and to me it's so interesting to learn how they arrange their stock, particularly of dyslexia-friendly books. I've chosen to have all our dyslexia-friendly books, mainly from the publisher Barrington Stoke Together. Now, I know that there have been great debates around what some librarians call their collections of dyslexia-friendly books, so with many calling them quick reads or easy reads, perhaps. Our collection of dyslexia-friendly books at Claude Academy isn't called anything. It's just a bookcase before junior fiction. So when I do library inductions, I tell the pupils that this collection is dyslexia friendly, but I really stress that it's a great collection of books for absolutely everyone. So now those of us that work in school libraries will know that if there is a stigma around something, we will know. So we will know because the kids will either tell us or we will overhear somebody making a comment. So I can truly say that I have never had a pupil refuse to take a Barrington Stoke book. I've never heard anyone say that these books are just for people that are dyslexic and they don't want to take one. And the kids at the school where I work are not shy about telling you how they feel. However, after speaking with colleagues in both school and public libraries, I know that we all have very different ideas on how we shelve our dyslexia-friendly books. Many library colleagues feel that they don't want to single out these books, and so they shelve them in with the rest of their junior fiction collections, or they have them as a separate collection of quick reads. I think that sometimes labelling books like Barrington Stoke as quick reads or easy reads can be problematic. Although these books are often slimmer than some of our other books with shorter chapters, I think labelling them quick or easy isn't great, as the very kids that these books can benefit often don't find reading them quick or easy. They do, however, gain confidence from finishing a book, which is something that they may never have done before, from reading a chapter book just like their peers. So I think it's good for us to really think about how we refer to these collections of books so that we don't inadvertently put off the very kids that could benefit from them the most. I think that where we shelve these dyslexia-friendly books is also important. I think that the intention of not making these books different to any other books in our collections comes from a really good place. However, I wonder how easy it is for the kids that would benefit from them to find them in the main collection. And I sometimes wonder if we're creating a stigma by presuming that kids will be embarrassed borrowing these books when there actually isn't any stigma. Okay, so when it comes to building an accessible collection, I always try and chat with pupils about what they'd like me to buy in, as I'm sure many school librarians here do. I find that audiobooks can be great for pupils with an additional support need, as it means that pupils can access amazing literature beyond their reading ability. Many public libraries offer free audiobook access through BorrowBox, and that is what we use in our school. So it's also great if pupils can follow along with a physical copy of the book whilst listening to the audiobook. Okay, so outreach programs can be a great way of connecting with learning support colleagues, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So whilst I've always had an interest in helping kids who struggle with reading, my own son was identified as dyslexic by his school, and this led to the outreach program that I'm going to talk about now. So in our area, when a child reaches P4, so around 7 to 8 years old, they stop getting a reading book to bring home and must take their own book into school to read during reading time or borrow one from the school library. So I'd spent some time volunteering in my son's school library and knew that there was nothing there that was going to be suitable for him, as he found reading accurately really hard. So I sent him into school with books from home. However, I started to think about all the other kids in his school who must be struggling with their reading and who were not able to bring a suitable book from home. So after discussions with my line manager and Crown Primary, where my son went to school, I decided to apply to the council for funding and was awarded almost £1,000. So it was at this point that I approached the ASN teacher at his school, Gemma Edwards, to ask her if she would like to work on this project with me, and thankfully she said yes. So what started as a project to get dyslexia-friendly books and graphic novels into my son's school, with Gemma's help, became a much bigger and a much more impactful project. So Gemma created a book of digital developers in school who were able to promote the books that I purchased to their peers. They were also able to peer educate other dyslexic children at school to use the software Read and Write on their Chromebooks and show parents at open afternoons how this technology works. These amazing kids led a whole school assembly with honesty and humour, explaining what it's like to be dyslexic at school, and spoke about the technology that they use to help them, as well as explaining about visual stress and why some children may use coloured overlays or have a coloured paper in their jotters, therefore breaking down barriers and trying to normalise learning differences. So with our help, Crown Primary became the first school in Highland to be awarded Dyslexia Scotland's Changemaker status. We even made the cover of the subscribers magazine, Dyslexia Voice, and on my slide we've got a picture of my son, who was the original inspiration for this project, and one of Gemma's digital developers holding a copy of the magazine. So since then, Gemma and I have become more involved with Dyslexia Scotland, and we're now part of the branch here in Inverness. And we've also rolled out the same project that we did at my son's school to another local school that Gemma works in, Ricketts Primary. And we have enjoyed working together so much that we have lots of other projects currently in the pipeline. So my main takeaway would be to reach out and make friends. You never know what it will lead to. School librarians and ASN teachers can have an incredible impact if they work together. My employer, High Life Highland, made a short video about our project with lots of the kids involved. So I'll finish with playing that for you now. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Amazing, April. Thank you so much. Honestly, what an incredible example of collaboration and just your passion driving you forward to get those young kids reading. So congratulations on the success of that programme. It's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Right, so now we're going to move on to our final speaker, and as I said, we are recording, so if you do have to drop off, you will be able to catch up. I am more than delighted to say that we're joined by Carnegie Medal winning author Sally Gardner, who is also an illustrator and whose own experience of dyslexia has shaped her lifelong commitment to storytelling and literacy. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Sally. Over to you.
Hello, am I seeable? Am I on? Oh dear.
You are on and you are seeable, and your slides are just sharing just now.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. What amazing speakers. I'm going to just very quickly go through my experience with dyslexia, because I'm an old, ancient sausage. I lived in the days where the word wasn't yet used, and I'm still amazed that we haven't brought it up today. But this word dyslexia is really wrong. It is anyone with dyslexia is already unable to spell it, and spends the rest of their life trying to think how it goes. I was called word blind, and it was a word that I sort of thought really slightly worked for me. I went to school very optimistic. I went to school quite late, 6. Next slide. And I was completely convinced I could crack reading, because I sort of knew what I wanted to do. My big trouble was I was called Sarah, and I had absolutely no idea where the H went. I could not, for the life of me, work the thing out. I wasn't sure if it went in the middle, it went in the beginning, and it was this that really began to be the problem. And then I went to school and they showed me a picture of a cat, and I was completely convinced this was simple. Can we have the next slide? We just looked at the cat. This is me playing around. I'm sorry. You know, you get a bit bored with these slides. Anyway, it should come up, the cat, next. Oh no, this is a picture of me with my bro. When I was, I think I was just 7. I got expelled from school very early on. In fact, this is the coat. And this coat really sticks with me till I'm about 11, when I was still wearing it, and it turned yellow. And in a way, it was the beginning. This coat represented all that I could not do, which was basically read. Next slide. And so they showed me a picture of a cat. And the cat looked fine. I liked it. A cat in a hat. I thought I could read. And then they showed me the next picture, which was where things went slightly wrong. They took away the image and they gave me the cat, the word. And that word was meaningless, utterly meaningless to me. And in a way, I could not find cat in that anywhere. It didn't mean a thing. My problems with education just really then went downhill. I got expelled quite early on from a very nice school for stealing buns. I couldn't make friends. I didn't know quite how to fit into this world. And I started to steal buns. And that in a way, they didn't know what to do with me. They got rid of me, which was fine. Can we have the next slide? Nope. This again me playing. And I went then to several schools, but the main thing that followed me all the way through was this ghastly reading scheme called Janet and John. And I lived in hatred of these 2 children. They were white, blancmange, the most boring children in the world. And they finally got a dog. It was a red setter dog. It was a red setter day. It was brilliant. I was so excited about this dog, except Janet decided to feed it sweets. I've now decided that Janet and John, are school inspectors, and they live very dull lives. And really, it was this scheme that I thought I was never going to read. So I was so bored in school that I decided the only way to cope with this, because I honestly thought I might die of boredom, was make up stories. And so I started to make up stories. Coming on the next slide. I started to make up stories about Janet and John, but basically about the murder of Janet and John. Next slide. Sorry about this. So this is an image that I rather like. This is sort of not me, but a boy. And I can so identify with this, looking out of a window and just seeing everything, the whole world, all of it, stories, ideas, inspiration. And on the blackboard are just words that he can't read, that are moving up and down, up and down. And that was very much me. And the next slide, please. I think I must have made up about 2,000 How to Murder Janet and John. Sorry about that. Sorry, hold on. How to Murder Janet and John. And I was just tediously bored. I cannot. School just did not hit the sides for me at all. Next slide, please. By the time I was 11, I was still on Janet and John. And by that time, I thought it was a little razzmatazz, a little jazz for cats. And I found myself at 11 and 12 really being called unteachable. And it was quite a revelation to be called unteachable. I got incredibly excited about it. I thought it meant that I might not have to go to school. And unfortunately, it didn't. It meant I did still have to go to school. And I was sent to a school for maladjusted children. And that really was where I learned to read. And I was learned to read because mainly I was completely left alone. Could we have the next slide? And I use this in schools, this one, because the idea of a normal apple. So everybody seems to want a normal child. I have no idea why. I couldn't imagine anything duller than a normal child, but we do, like we go into supermarkets and all apples have to look the same. I mean, the thing about apples, can we have the next slide, is there's 7,500 varieties of them. And it's the same with humans. We're all a little bit of everything. We're all a little bit of this. We're all a little bit of that. Not many of us are normal. I do not know what that means. And in a way, I think that has affected the way we look at dyslexia and we look at all these problems, neurodiverse problems, is in this search, we stand out when we shouldn't, because in a way, I would argue, we're fairly normal. We really are fairly normal. We just learn in a different way. And education hasn't, unfortunately, managed to move itself to teaching for the right-hand side of the brain. We are still teaching really for accountants. And in this day and age of AI, I think things have got to change a little bit more towards the right-hand side, the visual side of the brain. Next slide, please. I think we could go to the next one now. I think I made my point about apples. They're nice with peanuts. This is the word that was given to me. Yes, hopeless to spell. And the next slide. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So this is what we did for when I wrote a book called Maggot Moon. And we wanted very much to show teachers what it was like to be dyslexic. Can we have that slide, do you think? And the thing about this slide is we used it from all the things that children experience in words moving. Obviously, some of it's done especially for the book. And we have asked people to try and read it while it's going on. And the thing about trying to read this while it's going on is it's really hard. And for a severely dyslexic child like me, this is what I'm looking at. That is the page I see. I don't see words straight. And it's exhausting. It is utterly exhausting. And for some children, it becomes so bad that at the end of it, if we put that slide on again for me, just it just goes red or black. And that really is the disaster zone. So if we go back a little bit and we talk about children today, the trouble is if a child hasn't learned to read by 7, they're dyslexic, they're already beginning to know how to be naughty because they've got to not look a fool with their peers. By the time you're 7 and you can't read, the river is becoming wide. It's a little stream, but you're not going to cross it. And by the time you get to 8, you're in real trouble. Everyone else can read, you can't. And by the time you're 11, they're on the other side of the river, and there is no bridges, and there's lots of words, and they don't mean a thing. And this is what the problem that we have, I believe very strongly in this country. I do a lot in prisons. I see a lot of young men who I'm afraid got lost at 7. And that seemed to be the key mark of them going wrong. And I remember 7 as a very vital age of knowing when people go, well, can't you spell your name? I mean, what's wrong with you? And having to have things written on my arms so I could try and spell. We are getting better, but we still, as much as we pat ourselves on the back, have a long, long way to go, I believe. Next slide. Yes, well, when I go into schools, I always say one thing, which I always gets to teachers rather, is everyone has in their hand or working on a computer or whatever, they are all using a dyslexic or a neurodiverse brain. And in a way that goes back to the apples. Did that make them unnormal? No, it made them seers of the future, explorers of the mind. And in a way, these children today with dyslexia are exactly the same. They will come up and they will be the seers of the future. Next slide, please. This is my rogues gallery of people who are dyslexic. I sort of use it in schools, but it's quite useful to sort of show people who that you're not the famous ones now. In a way, I've done a few of them, but not many. And I loved using Agatha Christie. Everyone thinks it's the Queen, which is rather sweet. And Hans Christian Andersen. And the other one that I find very fascinating is Disney. And obviously Alan Turing, Picasso, Whoopi Goldberg, Steve, I've gone blank, and Leonardo da Vinci. Oh, and Roald Dahl, yes. So yes, those are my next slide. Einstein is not known to have said this. There's real problems with this, but whether he said it or not, he's one of my favorites. And he said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And I'm afraid I think a lot of dyslexic and neurodiverse children do spend their whole lives believing they're rather stupid. And the next slide is, let's see if that's the end. My greatest teacher at school, and I think after this, my greatest teacher was failure. I felt that it's a very underestimated teacher. It's one of the best. You learn very little from success, but failure really taught me everything. And I always think he's very undervalued as a teacher in school. The more failure, if it's used right with a smile on its face, can teach you more than someone about being successful. And I think that's really important when helping children, that failure becomes a stepping stone for success. And next. No, Wuthering Heights was the first book I read, so that was when I got into reading. Next. No, don't worry about this. Oh, maybe we should. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm going to end with this one because I really like this. My son, who's also dyslexic, years ago came back and he said, "Mum, I saw a car and it was Porsche and it had a number plate 1GCSE." And I thought this was really, really interesting. And I said to him, if your dream of what you want to do with your life was a car, what would it be? And he said, "Oh, it's simple. I know what I am." Next slide. And he said, "I'm a Lamborghini." I said, "Oh my word, Dominic, that's amazing. What gear are you in?" And he said to me, "I'm in second gear." I said, "Oh, that's really a bit tough on the old car." And he said, all right. If you're so clever, what kind of car are you?" So I said, "Well, that's quite easy. Next slide. I'm a battered up Morris Minor with the best starter engine in the world. In the end, it doesn't matter what kind of dream you have. What matters is that you keep it going and you keep your starter engine and your motor working. The rest is unimportant." Thank you very much for listening. Oh, and obviously, dyslexia is a superpower.
Sally, thank you so much. What a wonderful sentiment and moment to end on. Couldn't agree with you more. Interestingly, when my son was in secondary school, one of his learning support teachers said it's rather like young people with dyslexia are Porsches with the handbrake on. They've got everything they need. They just need that encouragement to take the handbrake off. So it's interesting that there's a car analogy there as well. But huge thank you to you for joining us this afternoon. I can see that everyone has really loved what you had to say and what you had to share. So I think we're going to draw to a close now. We have run over time, and I don't think we have got time for Q&A, which I'm sorry that we can't go to questions. I think I want to say a huge thank you to all our speakers and also to Sam Thompson for the pre-recorded interview. I think it's really clear that this is a complex issue and there's a huge amount to understand and a huge amount to consider. And I know many of you are doing amazing work in this space. I think as we wait for final outcomes of ongoing Department for Education developments and decisions, there's a lot of worry and concern, but I think what is wonderful is that school libraries and school librarians clearly offer us some hope, and that power of stories in whatever form they come in have the opportunity to help us understand and help us navigate this landscape with empathy, but really importantly help our children and young people find a story that's going to engage them and help them on their reading journey. So I think thank you again so much to all our speakers, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And obviously you can watch this back on the recording. I think we will end there. Thank you so much.